Aloha, this is Dan. From 2016 to 2017, I tried my hand at putting out video essays about film topics on YouTube. The production of it was more than I could handle at the time, so I shut it down after only several episodes. But now that I'm getting my podcast up and running again, I've reworked the audio from that show into podcast episodes, which I will publish by the dates that the YouTube episodes were originally published or intended to be published. This one was originally from March 1st, 2017. New content is on the way as well. Hey, welcome back to Breathing Underwater's Movie Talk. Look what I found.
Me again.
So Dave's in town for Christmas, and we wanted to do a video on our favorite movies because we realized that we never did that, and we probably should have started with that. But we're going to do it now. So when we say favorite movies, obviously there are tons of movies that would probably qualify in that category. There's movies that we've been watching since we were kids, movies that have always kind of been a part of our life and that continue to be. Things like, I'm going to exclude personally things like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Back to the Future, those sort of staple movies. We didn't discuss this beforehand, we're just going to wing this, so we'll see how this pans out. But I am not going to include some of those bigger classic blockbuster movies that I do truly love, but they're movies that I watch because I love them in general, not because they have a specific like tie into my life, and they haven't evolved in like meaning and
like personal nostalgia.
Not just nostalgia, but they haven't sort of like held new meaning over time and grown up with me in the same way that the movies I am going to discuss. I can just always watch something like Back to the Future or Star Wars and just love it because it's great and because, you know, I've always loved it. But the movies I'm going to talk about, for me at least, are going to be a little bit more of a personal kind of thing. We're going to talk about a few movies that are our favorite for personal reasons, but we're also going to list a few that are possible favorites or that we could consider adding to those, you know, top favorite lists if they hold the test of time the way that the ones that we currently call our favorites do.
Well, what's more recent and needs to stand the test of time, needs to be watched over and over again to have that lasting value.
Obviously, Dave is recovering from a cold, so...
Yep, not at my best, but fine.
So we'll just kind of go back and forth here. Do you want to start? Or
sure.
Should I start?
Sure. I have Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. I grew up with The Next Generation, I loved it when I was a little kid, I wanted to be there having adventures on the Enterprise, but I never thought it went to movies, even the first two, nearly as well as the original cast did. So those movies didn't grab me like the first six, with the exception of 5, of course. And Star Trek VI was just, to me, is an underrated, brilliant movie, and on all counts. It was set against what was happening at the time, the fall of the Soviet Union. It was a few years past that, but it wrapped up the characters, and it was very existential. It was so dark and ominous, and just the music. What do you think about that movie, Dan?
I also love Star Trek VI. I wouldn't necessarily put it on my top favorites, only because... Trek.
You said Trek.
I'll start over then. I also love Star Trek VI. I could definitely call it one of my favorite movies because it's definitely that, and Star Trek IV are the ones that I gravitate towards when I want to watch a Star Trek movie. But sort of like the way that the prequels kind of ruined Star Wars for me in a bigger sense. Like, I'll always love Star Wars in general and the universe and everything, but the prequels, I just can't get them out of my head. You know, like I can't watch A New Hope and not think and see Darth Vader and think about, you know, how coarse and rough sand is.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
I just can't,
you know,
I can't separate those things.
It's like having had a stomach bug and you can't get that taste out of your mouth after you vomited, and it lingers there. It's just...
Sort of like that, for me, the Next Generation movies kind of ruined the perfectness of movies like Star Trek VI, because Star Trek VI wrapped it all up so well.
Masterpiece, that's the word I was trying to say.
No. And then we got the totally like lackluster and you know, end to like Captain Kirk and stuff like that.
It was fun.
In Generations, and even though I remember liking Generations a lot as a kid, it has not stood the test of time with me.
Even the next one was
it's still
good, but
they're enjoyable films. But like I said, the same way that the prequels kind of cast this darkened aura over the franchise, That's what the Next Generation movies kind of did, because they were always kind of meandering. They didn't know what they wanted to do with themselves, and they weren't as train wrecky as the prequels. But Generations, especially, and how they handled the original cast in Generations, it's harder to watch the old movies now and not just kind of feel a little bit icky about it. Yeah. But Star Trek 6 as a movie, Star Trek 6. It's not track.
Trek.
Did I say track?
You keep saying track.
Star Trek 6.
Star Trek.
I hate you.
We're brothers. I watched that movie again. I watched it through all 6, and I honestly say the first one wasn't that bad. The original cast hated it.
The motion picture?
Yeah. It was boring. It was like a long version of the original show. It was like you could tell they didn't know exactly how to put it on film, but once it hit number 2, and many of film buffs know that the creator of, is it the writer or director of Wrath of Khan was the same man who did Undiscovered Country. That movie's just like every beat. That's what makes these movies special to me. It's like every beat, every line, every section, every microsection of the movies is just like hits you as just perfect. Like, this is amazing.
As captain, I am responsible for the conduct of the crew under my command.
And what's amazing about What's amazing about Star Trek 6 in regards to what you just said is that I remember hearing that their budget got slashed and there was a lot of things they had planned to do. Yeah, there was things they had planned to do that they couldn't do because of a smaller budget, which I think that was one of the examples of where limits foster creativity, where because of the things that they couldn't do with Star Trek 6 that they had originally planned to do, it actually made the movie better and tighter. There were big special effects. I remember the scene where Kirk is fighting himself, fighting the shapeshifter as himself. That was supposed to be some tentacle monster or something, but they didn't have the budget for it, so they...
Sure. Isn't it about time you became something else? I like it here.
Yeah, but I think it was actually kind of cooler to see him fight himself, and there was some interesting, symbolism there, so... So ever since I became an adult, I've always had this sort of top 5 that I've been carrying around with me. I'm gonna stick to those, but there's definitely some other ones that could possibly edge in. I'll give some honorable mentions later.
We agree. Disagree.
Well, okay. In no necessarily particular order, but just sort of like the top 5 movies that I think represent my scope of the type of films that I hold dearest to my heart. Number 1, I'm gonna go with Tommy Boy. I love Tommy Boy. It's my favorite comedy. I love it so much that a friend of mine and I hosted a Tommy Boy party. We made and served all of the different food references in the film, like the shrimp.
Why do you always have to deep turd these things?
Or the peanut M&Ms.
I think you're gonna be okay here. They have a thin candy shell. Surprised you didn't know that.
In the dashboard, French fries, the meat lovers pizza, chicken wings. It's like we did all this. And we made this stuff from scratch, and we threw a Tommy Boy party where we watched Tommy Boy. And the reason I love Tommy Boy so much is for a couple of reasons. It's just stood the test of time with me as a comedy. It has some big, like flaws and plot holes and things.
All this excitement around here, I kind of got a little hungry. Want to step over to my club and we'll grab something to eat?
But it's things that I can totally overlook. Because
movies has flaws.
Absolutely. And that's a good point that, to say that something is great, a lot of times it doesn't mean that it's perfect. It just means that it's something that is important to you. And sometimes it's the fact that it is flawed that I think makes it more interesting, because it's, it shows that it was made by humans and not churned out by some machine.
I gotta say that I don't have any comedies on my list, and if we're to put a comedy on my list, that might be it.
It's just one of those movies that, I watched it when I was a teenager and I thought it was just funny for all of its surface comedy, but it's kind of stuck with me over the years, and even though it's been really referential, I love, just the one-liners and everything from it.
I'm like Jojo, the idiot circus boy with a pretty new pet.
But as I've gotten older, I still really appreciate it because it does a good job balancing, like, some pretty heavy stuff and treating it respectfully, and then transitioning back to comedy without it, like, becoming a dramedy. It doesn't change genres, but it has a really good story that it needs to have some dramatic moments to tell it effectively. And then because of the things that happen in the movie where Tommy's father dies and he's dealing with that, it's a great setup for a coming-of-age tale, but it smacks of authenticity, and unlike a lot of other comedies, it tells a story that feels real even in its more farcical moments, and I feel like I can relate to Tommy and I can relate to David Spade's character.
Dad would have been proud of you. And you got a friend out of it.
It just always makes me smile, and it's a movie that I'll always just kind of cherish as like the last great comedy of the 90s. in a way.
This one I am sure about. Forrest Gump.
I'm Forrest Gump.
I didn't see that coming.
You didn't?
Mm-mm.
I love that movie. Like, the end when the feather's flying away, and just, it goes through so many periods and ups and downs, and to me it's one of the perfect movies. It's almost like the Citizen Kane of my generation for my growing up with, and it's just, I don't know, I would still watch it and still feel it just as much, just like the next movie on my list, like as if I was back then when it first came out. So, what about you, Dan?
Huge Forrest Gump fan. Forrest Gump is a movie I'd always watch when I was sick.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason,
Mm-hmm.
it just always it always kind of uplifted me when I wasn't feeling well.
And there's something about that movie where I feel a little bit like sad or nostalgic every time every period of history, every period of his life like goes into the next one. Because some reason you just love that period he's in and his adventures, and then he goes in the next kind of periods, and it goes in the 80s and the end. And
it does a very good job of showing time passing and how and life passing by too.
Yeah.
Death is just a part of life. Something we're all destined to do.
Next on my list is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. That movie was an instant classic the first time I saw it, but the first time I saw it, I was in film school. It was getting a lot of buzz, and where I went to school at University of the Arts in Philadelphia, there were no multiplexes in the downtown Center City area. It was only a chain of indie theaters or theaters that showed indie movies. So when my friends and I wanted to go off and see a movie, the closest theaters were indie theaters, so we ended up seeing a lot of indie movies, and that was one of them. It had a lot of buzz around it and a lot of hype. For an emo screenwriting film student at the time in the big city, that movie did impact me, but there's so many things going on, and it was so layered. I remember seeing it at least 2 or 3 more times in the theater before it really kind of clicked with me, and then ever since, and when it came to home video, and I've watched it repeatedly afterwards, it's one of those movies, of course, where every time you watch it, there's something new to experience and notice that you didn't see. There's so many things going on in the frame, and I'm always astounded at how much was done in camera, and I'm always astounded at the range of actors like Jim Carrey. I know that Jim Carrey's kind of burnt out in the modern landscape of films, but I still really respect him for being able to, be such...
for whatever, even though he's not the star he once was, he's fundamentally talented compared to the other well-known comedians
I agree.
Who is not talented.
Right.
Despite me loving his first 5 movies or so.
Agree. Well, that's a good point. Well, like when you you're talking about Adam Sandler?
Yeah.
When you do contrast him with someone like Adam Sandler, who's also tried to go do more dramatic roles, I think that Sandler's done a good job in his comedic roles.
Was excellent.
Yeah, and in his dramatic roles, but I just don't feel like he has the same range. Like I saw a video or read a review or something once where somebody said that Sandler, when he does a more dramatic role, he still plays the same kind of characters that he does when he plays comedic roles, which are like sort of like out of touch, childlike, arrested developmented, infantile, detached characters, people with weird neuroses and things like that. And they said he just doesn't do it as goofily, but he's still playing the same characters. And I think that he does stick close to home. But I think Jim Carrey does have proved himself in Eternal Sunshine and a couple other movies that he does have range, and that he is a very talented actor and not just a physical actor, because I really felt the chemistry with him and Kate Winslet in Eternal Sunshine. And Eternal Sunshine is a movie that as I've watched it, it's the kind of movie, and why it's one of my favorite movies is it's kind of evolved in connotation over time. When I saw it and I was younger, it was a much more idealistic version of relationships in a way. I was like I kind of cherry picked the parts that I could relate to the best. But then as I've gotten older, and I've had more experience in life, there's more, I can understand some of the cynicism more specifically.
I can't see anything that I don't like about you.
But you
right
will.
Now I can't.
But you will. You will think of things, and I'll get bored with you and feel trapped, because that's what happens with me. It continues to grow with me, and I think that's a real feat, for a movie to be able to do something like that, and that to me makes it more of a piece of art than just like a piece of entertainment.
It's one for me I have to watch again to see if it still holds up as much. I loved it, but... My next one is, I watched it again recently, and I was a little kid again. E.T. I'm not sure if Dan loves E.T. as much as I do.
I love E.T.
Or, you know, Spielberg may not have the filmmaking abilities of the people who did Mac and Me and Nuki, the much, you know, better.
Oh, yeah.
No, when I saw E.T. again recently, I had the same emotional reaction I did. I was like 5, 6, 7 when we were seeing it as kids over and over again. It's one of those movies, every beat, every line. Everything about it. Maybe it's because it's burned in my limbic brain from growing up with it, but it was like perfect. The atmosphere, everything about that movie was just fantastic. When he died, I felt sad, even though I knew what really happened, what was going to happen.
It still has that visceral,
yeah, it could
guttural reaction.
Yeah, love that movie still.
I love E.T. and more so I love and sort of miss that style of filmmaking where...
Well, that's one of my favorite eras of filmmaking is the early 80s. That noir, I never say it right. That noir style. I always felt Blade Runner as a movie was way overrated, but I love the style. The original Star Wars, that whole style of the early first half of the 80s. Just loved it.
And I haven't watched it yet. I know you did, but Stranger Things is trying to resurrect that style. And I know that Super 8, you know, the J.J. Abrams Spielberg collaboration film was meant to be and harken to that style. My favorite parts of Super 8 were the parts that felt more like something like E.T., where you had this group of kids that really had their own distinct personalities, and they just played off each other really well. And it was a time where I feel like directors were really focused on their actors and their storytelling, and it didn't feel as polished, you know, and the editing wasn't as tight, where they would let things happen in frame, in a scene, and it was more about the actors and their chemistry and their interactions than it was about them, you know, getting interesting, like, timing and dialogue by editing and the way they edited the scene.
Wasn't as, like, plastic, wasn't as manufactured.
And I love the kid, kind of like kids taking charge over, you know, like controlling annoying adults that just don't get it, and there was another one that came out a couple years ago that kind of failed, but it was a cute idea. It was called Earth to Echo, and it tried to kind of do this too, where the kids were the ones that really had the whole picture, and they were the ones that were doing. But it didn't feel like E.T. never to me felt like a kid's movie. Yeah. And a lot of those Spielberg movies that had kids as protagonists, they never felt like a family movie. They just to me felt like a drama or an adventure that happened to be about kids, and that's a style I feel like we've missed, because that's gone, and that it sounds like Stranger Things is brought back.
You have to see that, because it stands on its own regardless. I loved it not just for the nostalgia factor, but just it was just so good. It's almost like it just happened to be in the 80s. My only fault with that movie was the girls' powers were a little too conveniently powerful. There was a little bit Deus Ex Machina where it got them out of hard situations a little too easily, but other than that movie was, it feels like a movie, that's what many people describe it as. It was just, like, riveting, and the kids, because it's being told through the kids' minds, who are these D&D geeks, and, like, their language, so even the science, when the one science teacher described why there's this upside down section of the universe and all that, it was like this cheesy, like, early 80s pseudoscience that was, like, on purpose. It wasn't meant to be like science, this could be real. No, it's like this cannot be real, but this is like how it is in this universe. It was brilliant.
I will watch Stranger Things, I promise, after I get through a huge laundry list of other movies I'm trying to catch up on. Okay, I'll get to it. Oh, by the way, if you are going to criticize my pronunciation of Star Trek, track.
What's my bad ones?
Deus Ex Machina. It's Deus Ex Machina.
I took a Deus Ex Machina.
I'm not putting that in there. All right.
Aww.
Okay, the next one on my list of my top 5 favorite movies, I'm going to go with Finding Forrester.
My name is William Forrester. I'm that one.
And that one is a little bit more specific to me. I don't think if I had the same life experiences and inclinations about my passions and hobbies that would be one of my favorite movies. But because, you know, I had always fashioned myself a writer, for what that's worth, that because it's about writing and it's about, you know, discovering your voice as a writer and and the coming of age kind of thing, and also the relationship between Sean Connery and I can't think of the actor's name, but his name was Jamal in the movie. That I felt a lot of truth and authenticity in their relationship. After seeing that movie as a young adult, going into writing school, I then became a teacher. And I can still appreciate it now for the way that Sean Connery, sort of naturally, intuitively mentors this kid that he never meant to, and how that profoundly changed him as a person. And I can relate to experiences like that. It can be a life-changing thing to have
a mentor like that.
To be a mentor in somebody's life, to actually have to help shape somebody's experiences in their life. Can be a profound thing. And that movie, has again evolved kind of with me every time I watch it. There's something new for me to extract from it that I didn't get at a different point in my life. Oh, and it was also the first time that I ever heard Iz's Somewhere Over the Rainbow rendition at the end, the credits of that movie. I know it's been used to death in commercials and other kind of marketing since then, but that was the first time I heard it. And as a cap in that movie, something about that song in particular really hit me when I first saw it, and it continues to in context of that movie. It's set in the Bronx. It's very urban and gritty, and that song is like the complete opposite of the feeling of it, the place that it came from. So I thought that was a really interesting. I think I'm pretty sure
juxtaposition.
It was a pretty interesting juxtaposition that I'm pretty sure Gus Van Sant was the director of that movie. And I think that was an interesting choice. The way that it ends
was a fantastic movie.
Yeah, and it was, of course, it was one of Sean Connery's last great roles, before he retired.
You write your first draft with your heart, and you rewrite with your head.
Oh, and speaking of the authenticity of it, I remember having an argument with somebody in college in an education class, and we were all supposed to bring in movies that represented something about a topic that we were discussing, and mine was Finding Forrester because it did relate to this topic. And my argument for why it related to the topic was because how much it accurately represented, at least in my estimation, how people talk, especially in context of the kids in that movie. And there was somebody in my class that had also seen it and did not agree with me at all. He thought it was very forced and very, unauthentic. That's always stuck with me because as I watched it, I'm like, this is way more authentic than like how people talk in like most young adults in movies, like they're reading off of a script. And I felt like Gus Van Sant kind of casted people that knew how to speak in an authentic way in the context of the world that they were in.
Right.
Yeah, and
it's subtle. It could be subtle.
And I
it's not just saying a few big words.
And I felt like Gus Van Sant did a good job directing them because he let it sounded like he let the kids banter a little bit in certain scenes, and that it wasn't all scripted. I've never read the script, so I could be wrong, but it felt that way watching it.
I have two more, but one that I have to say, the movie Willow.
Willow off good.
Oh, that's one of your favorites.
Comes to my mind immediately when I think of my top 5 to 10 movies. I remember watching that. I was in kindergarten or first grade or something like that.
Did we see it in theater?
I've never seen it in theater.
I remember too.
It's an obvious homage to Lord of the Rings, I swear. The music. Who did the music? Wasn't it John Williams?
Probably John Williams.
Wasn't that Spielberg and Lucas collaborating?
Yep. One of the last great ones.
Yeah, but it was came out in '89. Its effects may be outdated by now, of course. It's just a fantastic movie. It was probably the best fantasy movie that came out in the '80s, and there were some stinkers.
The last time I checked, the DVD was out of print, which is a crime to me.
Really?
Yeah, because it's a movie that, because I think the success of Lord of the Rings, that it's kind of unnecessary in the market in a way.
Yeah.
Even though it's an obvious homage to Lord of the Rings, though, I feel like it carved out its own unique style and niche, and that it definitely used Lord of the Rings as like a template, but it's its own thing, and it doesn't feel like a ripoff. To me, it feels like the first great example of Lord of the Rings on film before Peter Jackson was able to do what he did with it.
So everybody that grew up with Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies, you have to see Willow.
I dwell in darkness without you, and it went away.
Okay, next on my list is Braveheart.
That'd be up my list.
we both saw. I remember seeing it in the theater, maybe 5th grade. We might have been that young. 7th grade. We were probably 7th grade, so 12-ish, I would say. I remember being completely horrified by the amount of gore. I'd never seen anything like that. Our parents were pretty good about sheltering us from things, outside of our rating realm when we were kids. Until the time that Braveheart came out, and it was getting so much buzz that they wanted to see it, and they thought that we would enjoy it, I guess, and we did. I just remember being so impacted by that movie visually, to the point of being, it was very off-putting to me as a kid because it was so violent. But as I've gotten older and continue to watch it, the thing that I love most about that movie, and also why I really respect Mel Gibson as a director, is because I feel that it's a movie where you can really pinpoint a lot of brilliance of the direction. There's a lot of films where you don't notice the directing as much specifically because it's a little bit more invisible, and it feels like the story's kind of telling itself naturally in a way. Braveheart, there's choices like the one that stands out to me. One scene in particular that stands out to me right now is the scene where the noble is going to take the just married woman and he that interaction between the husband and his posse, and how they wanted to make a violent protest about that. It was just beautifully done in this really somber, slow, and it was all told through music and movement. It almost felt like a dance was happening, and I just thought that was such that movie was one of the first movies that really made me notice that filmmakers, they make choices about the way that something written can then be filmed. And they that could have gone a lot of different ways. They could have just had a straight up arguing battle, or just the guards could have got behind the guys and just held knives to their throat, and everybody's yelling at each other, and the girl could have been crying. But I feel like I can't think of very many directors that would have made choices differently. But Mel Gibson just seems to have an eye for trying out different things that he has shown. There wasn't a fluke in Braveheart that he's done it in other movies too.
My hate will die with you.
My next one is Aliens.
Ooh.
Yeah. I watched it again. I've been watching all these nostalgic movies to see if they hold up, and yes, that movie does. It's the atmosphere, the banter between the Marines, the story, the Ripley finding Newt.
My mommy always said there were no monsters, no real ones, but there are. Alien
was great, claustrophobic sci-fi movie, this was very really creepy, and just knew about that alien from that era, and it wasn't just an alien in a suit. It was really just this organic water coming out. It was just really ugh. And Aliens, they still, even though a lot of them were people in costumes, it looked good. I mean, Cameron's another genius, like Gibson, and
Stan Winston.
The effects. Them two together, it was just, I'd love that movie again.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Well, piggybacking on that, my top favorite movie of all time, my number one is Terminator 2.
The future's not set. There's no fate but what we make for ourselves.
Because again, it's a movie that definitely has a nostalgia factor that I'll never be able to shake because I saw it when we were kids. I remember being in maybe around 5th grade, like 11-ish. I was very young and very not used to that kind of imagery and that kind of intensity in a film. And I remember that it was one of our father's friends had come in from out of town and was visiting and said, "Oh, you guys have never seen Terminator 2? Well, let's go rent that right now." I'll never forget. And I was just glued to the screen from the first frame till the end, and it has everything. And it's a flawed movie. There are things about it, like the ending, for instance, I feel is a little anticlimactic. That after it's this whole epic story and chase, and there's so much happens in it, that the fact that the ending battle is just between John and the T-1000 and the Terminator and Sarah Connor, like in this little metal planet. I felt like James Cameron is really good with set pieces, and he could have come up with more with that, but because it's so emotionally impactful and it ties it all up really well. This is kind of the way that I forgave Lost, even though the last season of Lost really disappointed me, but they were able to tie it up emotionally so well. And I think Terminator 2, it's everything together. It's the effects, the writing, the characters, the fact that they took, you know, Sarah
Music,
Connor,
directing,
Linda Hamilton,
acting.
all of it. It's like everything, and I'm not saying all of it's perfect, but all of it impacted me, and I noticed all of those things together and separately. And I mean, I think that was the first movie that really made me look at movies as something that I love, not just something that you know, that was fun for entertainment. I mean, even, you know, seeing Star Wars when we were younger, I loved Star Wars, but I didn't really look at Star Wars as just a movie. Star Wars, because, you know, with toys and everything, I looked at Star Wars as like an entertaining, fun experience. But Terminator 2 was like, I was like, I can't believe that this is a movie. This is so good, and there's so much to it that I wanted to pick it apart and know about all the components. And I've since gone on and I've read the script and I've, you know, seen all the behind the scenes stuff, and I really wanted to know, like, how did they make this amazing, you know, vision come to life? And that movie it continues now as to watch it, and, you know, James Cameron was so ahead of his time in terms of, you know, thinking about the effects, but I think also, you know, in terms of his story.
Yeah, how do you make an action movie that you feel?
Yeah, especially
how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it was such a great conglomeration of action and drama, you know, but real. Like, it was very raw. You know, there was so many things that really, you know, spoke to me and continue to throughout my life.
I know now why you cry, but it's something I can never do.
I always reference Terminator 2 when I think about, you know, I'll have a conversation about how fast technology is progressing, and every year and every day, you know, it seems like AI is only a matter of time, and the first thing I think of is like the Terminators and Skynet. Terminator 2 just, to me, set the standard for what a great movie is as a movie.
And you don't think of an action movie like that to be in a type of movie like that. You think of like a drama or like the standard Oscar type movies, but not.
I mean, the fact that they because, you know, the Terminator 1 was great because it, you know, it was a love story masked in a horror action format. But the characters were all not as dynamic as I was just amazed about what James Cameron was able to do by taking, like, you know, Linda Hamilton and even the Terminator, who's basically, you know, like an inanimate, you know, program machine, and able to make these incredibly sympathetic, dynamic, you know, soulful characters that I really relate to and that continue to impact me and I glean insight from as I get older.
Stop me. Yeah, I did. I love you, John. I always have. I know.
Alright, so that kind of concludes what we feel are favorite movies of all time at this point. Here's some honorable mentions, though, that could definitely make the list if we were a little bit more open-minded about it.
As far as older, more nostalgic movies, the one that comes to mind that's a close call for me is The Fugitive.
I didn't kill my wife!
It's just one of the movies that you watch, it's like almost a perfect movie. It's just fantastic.
That's what I was going to say. I feel like The Fugitive doesn't have any flaws, really.
Yeah.
There's nothing about it that I feel like that you can pinpoint and say, like, well, they could have done this better. Another one on my almost there list is Bad Boys.
Now back up, put the gun down, and give me a pack of tropical fruit Bubblicious. And some Skittles.
Nice.
There's something, the original Bad Boys, everything worked in it for me, even though it was full of cliches, you know, like the evil foreign super villainy guy, and, you know, and the damsel and the stress kind of stuff, and the dynamics of those characters, it was really what worked for me in Bad Boys was the scripts and the actors and the way that they portrayed those characters so perfectly. Just that movie, though, because what's so ironic about that movie to me is that now I look at the director Michael Bay as everything wrong with modern cinema, but for somehow he made one movie, and don't get me wrong, I like The Rock and and I liked what did he do?
I liked the first Transformers when it came out. Oh, cool! That's how the Transformers.
Yeah, the first Transformers movie was watchable.
Sure.
Yeah,
why 4 more? Why?
Oh, there's going to be
so many starving
more than
third world nations that could be paid with the money.
But there was something about the original Bad Boys that just worked for me, and it's a movie I can just watch endlessly and enjoy always. And it was like a great action movie.
Hello. It's my library.
Oh, I had one. Jurassic Park was a close call.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
It's just a great movie. I remember when it first came out, like, oh, it's so much not more, because we were newer to the idea of an adaptation, and it was like, oh, it's more fluff than the book. It's more, they changed the kids around, they changed the tone a bit. It's not as deeply philosophical. Well, it's had to be a big movie, and it was fantastic. I didn't like any of the other ones.
And like I said before, movies, like for me, when you mentioned Willow, I thought that was because Willow for me kind of fits in more with the Star Wars, Indiana Jones, like movies that are just timeless classics that I'll love no matter what. But I don't put those in my favorite because they don't have the same like emotional resonance, I guess.
Oh, Willow
in
does
a way.
For me.
Yeah, well, I mean, Willow does. I don't know. I guess I need to rethink Willow.
I mean, True Lies I loved, but it's just a fun, almost farce action movie.
Well, we could go on all day about movies.
Yeah, but
so
I want to get to the newer ones that could, if they stand the test of time, could be on this list.
Yeah, so there's definitely some movies, more recent movies that I feel like could fit into the top favorite lists kind of category. But they just haven't been around long enough, and we haven't experienced them enough and grown with them enough to know for sure. But here's some that we feel like could be there someday, and I'm hopeful that they will be. Go ahead.
First thing that comes to my mind is Apocalypto.
In the same vein of Braveheart, Apocalypto there was so much about the direction of that movie that made it great. Because the idea was great, and the sets were great, and the execution was really top notch and creative, but there was so much about it that was, you could tell, was Mel Gibson being really creative with what he had and the choices he was making on set and in the editing.
The word hubris. Hubris?
Yeah, hubris.
Hubris. The whole movie, gotta check my pronunciations. The whole movie is like to me it was like a parable on the hubris of civilization and modern society. I just loved it. He's a brilliant filmmaker.
So there's been a few movies that I've caught up with recently that have come out in the past few years in the action side of things that I feel are up there. But the one that really comes in, so all of Neil Blomkamp's stuff so far I've really loved. Have not had the chance to rewatch it enough. And haven't stood the test of time, but I'm really excited about what Neil Blomkamp is doing. But right before I saw Neil Blomkamp stuff, I caught up with Edge of Tomorrow, or some redub Live, Die, Repeat, which is the stupidest thing they could have done. But the Edge of Tomorrow, I haven't felt that way watching a movie that I can recall since watching Terminator 2 the first time. I loved Edge of Tomorrow so much, or maybe Die Hard 3 too. When I saw Die Hard 3 the first time, the way it just kind of catches you right at the beginning, it hooks you. There's not a lot of setup, and the movie just goes. So Edge of Tomorrow was just one of those non-stop, like action-packed thrill rides that so many action movies are marketed as, non-stop action thrill rides, but I always leave disappointed from them because there's tons of setup and there's lulls. But Edge of Tomorrow it's just perfect in that for me, and I'm hoping that it's going to be, as I watch it, continue to be up there.
Hey! Hey, mate! I think there's something wrong with your suit. There's a dead guy in it.
And it might be a trend to love this movie, but The Dark Knight.
Why so serious?
I feel like could get there. I have to watch it over and over again. But
yeah, I'm with you on that. I feel like I had a little bit of a fallout with The Dark Knight after I realized how specifically Christopher Nolan was not trying to make a more comic booky superhero movie. He was trying to make a more grounded superhero movie, and that to me isn't authentic Batman, because Batman is inherently a silly character. Anybody that would dress up as a bat and wear a cape and fight crime is silly. If you're going to do it, you have to balance that a little bit, and I felt like Christopher Nolan's movies were a little bit too gritty.
He was too realistic. That's one
I felt like he really wanted to make more of a crime drama than
which Batman was, but
a superhero crime drama, not just a crime drama with
the original Batman was another close call. I watched that again; it still holds up. It's excellent.
The original Tim Burton 1989 Batman, I feel like walked that balance a lot better of being silly but also being dark. And I thought that was one movie where Tim Burton actually got his tone right. The last movie that I have that I can think of right now that could definitely be one of my all-time favorite movies, I think, is going to be Inside Out. That movie was the most. I mean, I love almost everything that Pixar has done.
I put WALL-E up there too. That's my favorite Pixar.
Man, I put WALL-E up there too, but I feel like Inside Out is a deeper movie.
And I'm not the biggest Pixar fan, admittedly, but I love WALL-E.
I love WALL-E. I love WALL-E for a lot of different reasons, and Up, you know. But I feel like Inside Out is of all the Pixar movies is the one with the most emotional, the deepest and most layered, you know, because it was dealing with emotions. It really hit home for me on a really, really personal, distinctly, you know, like specific level that even Up didn't. Because I mean, I can relate to Up so much about that sense of adventure, you know, and not living your life the way that you expected to. I mean, that stuff really rings true with me. But Inside Out, just like it had everything that all the other Pixar movies had and more. And I feel like Inside Out might become one of those all-time favorites, but we'll just
everybody's got to watch that movie because it's a psycho ed in emotional intelligence.
So that's all we got for our top favorite movies and honorable mentions and potential favorite movies down the line. Thank you for watching, Dave. Hope to see more of you soon.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and end this.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. All right. Be sure to visit breathingunderwater.us. Follow me on Instagram at breathingunderwater1 and drop me a line at breathingunderwater1@gmail.com. Please note that I do not claim any ownership of any media presented in this podcast, which is only used for promotional purposes unless otherwise noted, and all views and opinions are those of the person expressing them and do not represent any other entities discussed in this podcast.